Hello everyone and welcome back to History. We have started a new series. This one is about European history and the first series in that is the French Revolution. We will try to present the French Revolution through videos from 12 o'clock to 14 o'clock. We have already created the first video using AI and vibrant visuals. The content of the first video is about the political causes of the French Revolution or the responsibilities of the king during the French Revolution. Today, the video we are going to watch is about the economic causes of the French Revolution. In any major change or political movement, economics plays a very crucial role in revolutions because revolution means a fundamental change. When the common people feel cornered, that's when they move towards revolution, even when the oppressive social system or repressive laws are still in place. But this is about the economy. He failed to deal with the economic crisis of contemporary France, fourth grade and of course Saraswati. They were involved in one war after another, which the people on the front lines knew was a waste of money. They were not getting bread where the people of France were. Bread riots were causing famine, and even in the severe winter where crops were being damaged, the king spent his luxuries and money. The people of France could not accept this. As a result, when this economic crisis in France as a whole became severe, they wanted to impose taxes on the king and nobles of France. But the accused sat down, and that resulted in the State General, that resulted in the oath of the telescope, and the fall of the Bastille. So the main place in the overall context is the economic crisis, and the economic crisis. But it was created by the people at the top of the society using the economy for their own interests. They don't think about the common people. They impose taxes, and with that tax money they have their own luxury, their own splendor. The people of France were the first to stand up against this injustice, against oppression. They moved towards revolution. So, to understand this, you need to watch this video from start to finish. We hope you will watch this video and let us know how you found it in the comments box, and please like and share it. Let's get started with today's video on the economic causes of the French Revolution.
We've already seen the picture of the reckless lives of kings, queens, and the elite floating in luxury and opulence. At the same time, the suffering and helpless people beg for a piece of bread. We have witnessed a strangely discriminatory society, but the organized resistance of the bourgeoisie with the helpless farmer artisan Shakil, who is stuck in the fight for life, with his back against the wall. And by witnessing the preparations for radical change or revolution, we are going to analyze the present in terms of the past, and we will also be able to create an outline for the future. So, will you watch this video from start to finish? British economist Adam Smith referred to France at that time as a museum of flawed economics in his book The Wealth of Nations. It was like a saying that was literally true. Before the French Revolution, we will first discuss the discriminatory tax system. It was like nobles fight, the clergy press, and PayPal, pay. It was almost literally true. Before the French Revolution, we will first discuss the discriminatory tax system. On the eve of the revolution, 95% of France's total wealth was owned by the first and second estates, that is, the clergy, and the elite. On the other hand, the third estate, which means the farmers, artisans, and the burgeoning bourgeoisie, collectively owned just 5% of the total wealth. Yet, they were the ones who contributed 95%. Just think about how discriminatory the society was in France back then. Let's take a quick look at the taxes that were in place in France at that time. For example, the taille was a direct and major tax collected from everyone except the clergy, the elite, and the bourgeoisie. Capita CU. This is a production-based income tax. Essentially, this tax was imposed to cover war expenses. So, this was a religious tax that had to be paid. It was 1/10 of the produced crops. The gabelle is a tax imposed on salt, which the poor French had to pay annually. There are more. For example, karbi. This is mandatory labor. In other words, forced labor. Working on the feudal lord's farm, preparing food, constructing roads, building forts, etc. was mandatory labor. Belgium. Income tax on movable and immovable property. This country. Taxes were levied on consumer goods, especially on alcohol or tobacco products. Bengali. A portion of the produced crops was allocated for making the job easier. Sampat. This was essentially a portion of the crops due to the feudal lords. Land. Taxes were collected from government khas land. There is a tax on the transfer of property. Taxes were imposed on things like onions, roads, and ferries. So, we can see how many different kinds of taxes the people of the Third Estate had to pay. Meanwhile, those at the top of society, like the clergy or the elite, hardly had to pay any taxes at all. Now the question is, how did a financial crisis occur despite all this tax collection? Why did they go bankrupt back then? The Treasury of France. In fact, the bankruptcy of the Treasury was due to unnecessary wars and extravagance. Let's not overlook this. Around 3 o'clock, a huge amount of money was drained in expensive wars. We haven't looked at the statistics a bit. For example, the War of the Austrian Succession. This took place roughly between 1740 to 1748. 1.3 billion was spent here, which is what they call Brest. This environment, it had to be lost. Then there was the century-long war. 1756 to 1763, 1.8 billion. Money was spent. In return, they lost control over Canada and the Indian territories, France, and ultimately the problem in America. England had its issues there too, where France meddled, and that was the American Revolution. From 1778 to 1783, during this period, 1.3 billion was spent. But money, it was spent. They did achieve victory. But the people of France didn't really gain anything special from it. As a result, this war was one that the people of France did not want. The extraordinary expenses of this war had intensified France's financial crisis. Maybe that could have been prevented to some extent. The kings, queens, and aristocrats of that day were somewhat extravagant in their spending. He could have prevented the waste of money by introducing himself. But that is the dazzling splendor of the Versailles royal court, which was destroyed during the destruction. The descriptions and images of the bankrupt treasury would get overshadowed by the wealth of the king, queen, and the opulence of the nobility. Queen Marie Antoinette had almost all her servants and attendants. Money was spent like water in unplanned sectors. A huge administrative fleet means huge expenses. So, if not France, then who will face the financial crisis? And it was right at this time. France faced a terrible natural disaster. In 1788, there was a terrible hailstorm. The wheat fields were completely destroyed. From 1788 to 89, this period just before the revolution, those terrible rivers had completely turned to ice. The flour mills had come to a standstill. In other words, it was opened up later. Production had decreased by almost 40 to 50%. There have been some minor natural disasters. In the year 1783, there was a terrible eruption of the Lucky volcano in Iceland. As a result, global temperatures dropped, which had an impact on France. This terrible winter in 80 years, it shook the people of France. As a result, this natural disaster had the most devastating impact. But the farmers of that day had seen a significant drop in their production. However, the tax collection didn't decrease at all. Instead, there was severe oppression for tax collection. Brutal exploitation. In such a situation, the price of bread went up almost 88%. A craftsman would spend almost 60% of what he earned. So, what would people eat behind the bread? How would they survive? In Paris alone, there were almost 400,000 unemployed people. A food crisis started all around. Shops began to be looted. Even bread was looted. In 1775, such a major uproar was referred to as the Flour War. In the lead-up to the revolution in 1789, riots broke out over food. To come out of this overall financial crisis, at that time in France, there were mainly two finance ministers, and Maker had put forward several proposals. Notably, the king or the administration should impose taxes on the nobility. Imposing a universal property tax, that is, a tax on everyone's property, and to reduce royal expenses and administrative costs. In 1787, the Assembly of Notables or the Council of the Nobility rejected these proposals. In 1781, Necker presented a report where he discussed how to curb royal waste with data, but he was dismissed from his position. That is, destruction leads to the loss of wisdom. But Saraswati was overwhelmed by the financial crisis and social chaos. Saraswati ultimately proposed imposing taxes on the elite. He agreed, but the nobility rejected the king's move. They declared in a rebellious tone that the king had no right to impose this tax. Only the State General has this right. They are the State General. The demand to convene a session was made. This is the nobility's rebellion. According to historians, it was through this noble rebellion that the initial phase of the French Revolution began. This ultimately made the discriminatory social system and social conflicts in France inevitable. In the next video, we will discuss the social causes of the French Revolution. The fragile social structure of France in the late 18th century. We will highlight. Of course, but this video is not the only one. You will watch the upcoming videos. We will enter a new world at 1 o'clock. Everyone take care and stay healthy. We'll meet again. Thank you.